It's a pleasure to be here for another session of AI for the Better. My guest for today is Arman Ali, the Executive Director of NCPEDP, which is the National Center for Promotion of Employment for Disabled Persons. Welcome, Arman. Thank you so much for taking the time out for this.
Thank you, Farangis. Very kind of you to have me here.
As we start, Arman, if you can just share a little bit of background about the organization.
NCPEDP is a 29-year-old organization and India's leading organization, which is into research-based advocacy around disability inclusion in anything that you see is in whether it is education, employment, accessibility, law, any ongoing discourse in the country. So that's what we do. We also run India's largest network of organizations of persons with disability, and we run two prestigious awards. One is the NCPEDP Helen Keller Award, which we recognize efforts of individuals and organizations promoting employment for disabled people, and the Universal Design Award, which we recognize efforts of people who are promoting accessibility and universal design into products, services, policies, and so on.
As we start off the conversation, can you help me understand what is the current state of employment for persons with disability in India? And what are the key challenges that you see that they're facing?
State of employment of people with disability has not changed in last 3 decades. So I think back in 1999, when NCPEDP did the first study to understand the status of employment for people with disability in India, it was less than 1% of people were employed in private sector or otherwise. We are in 2024, despite the 4% reservation of persons with disability in public sector and promotion and equal opportunity policy, which is mandated under the law for the private sector. We're still less than 1% of people who have got the meaningful employment. Irony is, Farang, is that if you look at the data by the government, people with disability who studied up to the class 10 are more employed than people who have done higher education. The biggest challenge I see is accessibility. Accessibility to transport, to accessibility to schools, colleges, accessibility to curriculum information. I think that is the biggest hurdle where you people with disability struggle to get meaningful education. And then accessibility to place of work, to access job market, and all the jobs that you see in the private sector are largely in metro and big cities. So migration becomes a huge challenge for disabled people. Again, I would cite due to accessibility.
Now, with AI coming in, artificial intelligence, and it's getting embedded into a lot of systems, into a lot of devices, personal as well as systemic things. Are you seeing it playing a role in helping or creating more employment opportunities?
Think technology is a great enabler, and if it is designed keeping in mind the needs of disabled people, if accessibility is helping create more accessible infrastructure with technology or with information system or anything that you do, then of course yes. But if AI looks at taking away kind of roles that disabled people are doing right now at a very entry level jobs mostly, then it is not. But if you look at AI and its involvement to create more accessible feature and accessible practices, I think it is a win-win situation.
Do you think there are any policy changes needed to better integrate AI and advanced technologies into the workplace, which would help or support persons with disability?
I think there is a need to create a policy around assistive technology for people with disability. India doesn't have a policy where you can have an ecosystem around technology which will help disabled people, participate in the labor market or in with education and so on. So this policy needs to come wherein more investment will come around assistive technology or AI that will kind of create the environment, the kind of environment we have today for startup in India. So that is what I would suggest is needed.
What kind of elements do you think would be in that policy?
I think we need to promote, manufacturing and the solutions of assistive technology, AI driven technology in India, so that it is developed keeping in mind the needs of people with disability in India, both urban and rural space. And this needs investment. So if government comes and comes up with certain schemes and subsidies, like it is coming for many other industries, so particularly focusing on AI and disability with accessibility, if there are policies which says that certain number of investment are done in accessibility and technology or assistive technology, government will subsidize X, tax or whatever, or put in that percentage of money into that you do. I think that kind of policy is required to be brought in.
What about AI being used in leveraging for training and upskilling persons with disability so that they are more equipped for, the workforce?
AI can also be a very interesting tool to look at if it is keeping in mind the accessibility need of disabled people. For example, somebody who's blind, for somebody who's deaf and hard of hearing, and people who are mute. So how do you gauge that need, and you are able to provide reasonable accommodation, you are able to provide the information in a manner, or the teaching in a manner which is more accessible for disabled people.
What are some of the other ethical or privacy concerns with, using AI for uh, helping in terms of this?
For example, if I ask the AI to send you an email and say that, we are having this meeting, can we talk about certain things of AI? It suggests everything. That's not my knowledge. And without reading it, if I copy and paste and send an email to you for an appointment or for regarding this interview, then it kind of takes away the integrity of people. It becomes very fake. To I know people who were not able to write an email properly. They're being verbose now. They're all the time sending you email because they have a bot helping them out, and it makes sense as well. If they are able to key in the right note of what the email is supposed to be about. How are we going to regulate? There need to be transparency that this is what we have done through using AI, or this is what been used to generate this report, like you put as a reference. So that kind of ethics is required to be done.
I understand that you all have also set up an assistive technology hub in partnership with some organizations. So, what are you all trying to do there with the assistive tech?
1 out of 10 people in India get assistive, technology or device which they need. So there's an acute shortage, and India having the largest population of disabled people in the world, there is a need to create an ecosystem which kind of promotes, assistive technology, whether a device or a technology for cross disability. I think assistive technology is a great enabler to kind of help people with disability get into education, or get into a labor market, or have a social life. As I said, that there's a need that the government come up with a policy, and there are many innovations that is being done in India around assistive technology. People are doing innovation product and services in India and selling it in other countries, but disabled people in our own country are not aware about this. I use a wheelchair myself, so my wheelchair is a German wheelchair now. Because why can't we make that kind of a wheelchair in India? Because we don't have the ecosystem. The government is not coming out with that kind of a policy where you are able to procure raw materials or create a kind of wheelchair. So the huge user base in India itself. Okay, so we will be able to cater to our need and then also give it to the rest of the world. So for this, there is a need to, the domain expertise, the urban rural scape, the cross disability. We just can't be going to different places to find out what's available, what's not. So we're trying to do is to create a one-stop hub for all needs that you may have around, accessibility or assistive technology, so that disabled people know what are the choices. There is affordability. There is need to get into policy space, because just a device cannot enable you. The environment has to be also enabling, which supports the technology that you use.
What do you think about policies that need to be put in to ensure that any technology which is using AI is itself accessible? Because a lot of times the softwares, the way they've developed so far, accessibility has been the afterthought, right? But by design itself, if it's something that could be put in, is there some thought on, framing some policy around that or educating people?
There is a law and policy in place already. The RPWD Act very clearly says that all your product and services has to be accessible for disabled people, including your built infrastructure and transport. But irony is that is always not looked into as a mandatory provision. So this 8th November Supreme Court order around accessibility, which talks about making accessibility a fundamental right, and the court has directed the government to come up with a set of non-negotiables, that what is mandatory you cannot do without that. We cannot create a product, service, or a building or a infrastructure without these non-negotiables. So I think that we are in that process, that I think we will have see this huge change in India to come. To your point, how people look away on accessibility, we just did a digital accessibility landscape of finance sector in India. So in partnership with Barrier Break and NCPEDP, we looked at 100 of fintech and edtech companies, their websites and so on. You would be surprised to know that 91% of them are inaccessible. They don't adhere to accessibility needs. So this is something as basic as a website. So I think to create a ecosystem to include AI to promote accessibility would requires a lot more thought, needs to bring on in the industry player, people with disability together, and to understand how do we use it to enhance more accessibility, make it easier for people with disability to navigate information or transport, or to move around in a manner that they are able to participate with everyone on an equal basis.
And as you're advocating for all this to be built in into the accessibility, what do you feel are the major areas where y'all as an organization also want to focus, which you feel would have the biggest impact?
I think one of the major area to work on is creating awareness and the knowledge. Like we all know about things like GST. When you do business, you need to have a GST. You need to this red light, green light, yellow light. The seat belt. There's creating awareness, whether it is through a penalty form or a safety point of view. I think disability doesn't have that kind of a view but through people. It's still looked at from a very stigmatized point of view. It is still looked at as a cost and not investment. So I think there's a need to create more awareness about disability, and parallelly you have to create knowledge of to do how to do this, the know-hows of it. Businesses or anybody who would know about disability, then they would see it as part of their life, because the intersectionality around disability kind of cuts across. And if you are making anything which is accessible and usable for people with disability, it makes more business sense. So I think they need to create more awareness about the lifespan of a person with disability, and disabled people knowing about their rights and using those rights to acquire whatever they need. I think would set that kind of platform where accessibility remains the core in everything that you do. Also, Farangis, anything which is accessible for disabled people, it is accessible for all. It does not create barrier for anybody. If you're an elderly person, if you are a pregnant mother, or a child, or carrying heavy bags, and so on and so forth, or somebody who's temporarily ill, somebody who's got arthritis, somebody who's got obesity, and so on. Like, I'm just saying in terms of physical infrastructure, but otherwise also, if you have any invisible disability, like a blood disorders on days that you are low, but any infrastructure system, whether it is digital or otherwise, enables people to navigate the place better, feel more included, and participate.
What is the innovations, the latest ones which you've seen, which you have said, these have really made a difference?
Innovations are there plenty. I mean, how a motorized unit can make your manual wheelchair go around the city on your roads. There are many apps that has come up for people who are hearing text to speech, speech to text, and so on. There are glasses which has come, which is like reading. Opticals are a huge area where it is revolutioning. A lot of things will change in times to come. A lot of improvement around the kind of material being used to make prosthetics and artificial limbs and so on. So it's huge. The challenge remains in awareness of it. That these are aware the market, finding market, like smart canes for blind people. So market is where it is missing out from. The innovations need market number. The numbers are missing. Affordability is a huge problem. But some of the technology to around visual impairment for people who are deaf is phenomenal.
What are you optimistic about as we are going ahead? You would have been seeing changes happening.
The youth with disability, I'm very optimistic about them. I think they will find the way. They are able to take it forward. They are able to articulate their thoughts. They are able to fight it out at their own level. India cannot be ignored. We are in that space in the world that we are moving forward, and disabled people will be able to take it forward to be a part of the society. We are moving ahead, so I'm quite excited about the whole thing.
As we wind up, any thoughts you'd like to leave for our viewers?
Anything you do, whether you are creating a product or a service, anything that you do, always imagine a disabled person to be there. Like the next prime minister could be on a wheelchair, the next chief justice can be a blind person. So I think wherever you see person, any person with or without disability, presume competence.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time out today to share this with us and have this conversation, Arman.